Lord, make us ready for what's getting ready to come, Lord, on the earth. It's getting ready to come even to Columbus. We pray for things like revival. We pray for things like for the Lord to release his fire. And he's going to do it, but it's not going to come the way that we want it. It's not going to come the way that we want it. The Lord's saying, there will be chaos in Columbus, but out of chaos will come glory. Lord, come tonight and sober us, Jesus. Lord, sober us. Forgive us for lip service. Forgive us, Lord. Amen. All right, you can sit. Okay. I'm not in a hurry, so I hope you're not in a hurry. I haven't traveled in 4 months. We just had our second kid. I've just been home. So I've got a lot to say. Because my 3-month-old kid has no idea what I'm telling him. And my 18-month-old daughter doesn't really care. She just wants to change shoes every 5 minutes. I'm like, who cares about your shoes? Jesus is coming. And she goes, sure. She just looks at me. And sometimes we take ourselves too serious. I'll be in prayer. I remember one time I was praying, I was on the floor praying, and I felt so mighty in God a few months ago. I really broke through in prayer. I'm so deep in the Lord, and you feel like you're about to cry. My vocal cords are really weak, so I'm sorry. I know I'm like a sound guy's nightmare. Lord bless them, give them wisdom and revelation on how to turn the thing. Amen. So, I was in prayer and I was so deep. I'm about to break in deep. I'm on the floor, I hear footsteps, and it wasn't the Lord. My wife, she needed me to change a diaper. And the Lord said, you broke through, go change the diaper. Anyways, it's for any parents out there. Struggle's real. Really, it is, right? But it's holy to the Lord. And one time I was praying and I got mad because I had to go watch my daughter play with dolls. It was a couple weeks ago. I was like, I finally got up early. And you did too. You want to play with these stupid dolls. And they're going to give you insecurity for the rest of your life. You're never going to look like that. They're white, skinny, and blonde. You're Hispanic. You're going to eat rice and beans. They don't have Cuban dolls. Well, they do. They're voodoo dolls. And anyways, I'm sitting on this stupid rocking chair. I was like, this is my life. I used to go to the nations. Now I will watch my daughter play with these stupid dolls and change shoes all the time. And you know what the Lord said? He said, I'm right here. He said, you got to learn to see me. And he said, because if you can't see me with the stupid dolls, how are you going to see me in persecution? I mean, if you can't see the Lord when you're just sitting in your house in America, you know what I'm saying? And the Lord was like, no, this is the training. You got to learn to hear my voice right now. You got to learn to find me right now. Anyways, I prayed in tongues and played with Barbies. It's a true story. And my daughter doesn't even remember it. So that's what I do. Anyways, it's nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about. But I was just thinking about that. But I work with an organization. We were going to watch a video, but for the sake of time, we won't watch it. Unless you guys want to watch it. But I'll play a video. Okay, so I work with an organization called Sheep Among Wolves. And so I don't know if you guys know this, the fastest growing church in the world right now is in Iran. So contrary to popular belief, you don't need a Republican president for the gospel to go forth. And you sure as heck don't need a Democratic president for you liberals. I know, Jesus is a conservative, Jesus is a liberal. No, he's none of that. Jesus is a king. Your vote doesn't count in the kingdom of heaven. And your opinion doesn't matter in the kingdom of heaven. Right? Like everybody's, the American dream. You know, you only dream when you're sleeping. That's the problem with the American church. Isn't it amazing? In November of 2020, you had half the pastors using a whole bunch of verses for Donald Trump, and then the other half of the pastors using the same verses for Joe Biden. You're both just as freaking delusional. Hey, you think Jesus' great solution is to put an old guy in the White House? Seriously, like, do you know that America isn't even in the Bible? Oh, actually, it's in two verses. Two verses. And all the nations shall and all the nations shall surround Jerusalem and go to war against her, and you will be hated by all nations. There you go. There's America. Figure that out. You know, I was like, oh, Jesus is a communist. Well, you're crazy. You ever been in a communist country? Anyways, I've just been home for 4 months. This is what I think about when my daughter's playing with her dolls. Like, Americans are ridiculous. Like, we're like just like the Romans. We're the greatest thing. And then you don't even exist in like a couple of years. You're just a tourist hotspot. And then people just pay money to remember how great we used to be? It's all going to become ruins. But no, Jesus is a king. Listen, you don't get a vote in his kingdom. Wait, do you understand? The fastest growing churches in the world exist in places that are the number one violators of human rights. Wow. This has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about, but anyways, I've just been home and I got a lot of things on my mind. I mean, you guys, I think we're fighting for the wrong things. I mean, there are people here that would rather die for the Constitution than for the Bible. We're like, oh, the American dream, God's going to wake you up and it's going to be a rude awakening, America. Do you hear what I'm saying? You have these countries. Do you understand that Iran, fastest growing church in the world, by the way, number one exporter of terrorism in the world. You know what the second fastest growing church in the world is? Afghanistan. Afghanistan has just become the most persecuted country in the world. The top 10, by the way, America's not in the top 10. Neither is any country in Europe. The top 10 fastest growing churches in the world are all in persecuted countries where there are massive human and civil rights violations. Do you know why the church is growing? Because no one's fighting for their rights. They're just planting churches and making disciples. Jesus didn't promise any rights to you. The moment you got born again, you gave up your rights. You don't have rights. You're dead. Dead people have no right. And so anyways, so Iran's blowing up, and in the last several years, we've seen over 600 churches planted in Iran. Several hundred, hundred across the Middle East, places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, different places, all the vacation hotspots of the world. The Lord's doing something extraordinary in these countries, and it's amazing. So anyways, there's a documentary that was released a few years ago. There's a documentary that was released a few years ago called Sheep Among Wolves, Volume 2. There's 2 volumes. The first one's okay. Volume 2 is the really good one. But Sheep Among Wolves, Volume 2 is the story of the underground church in Iran. And so here's a trailer for the film. It's all free. We don't charge for anything. We don't make money off of anything. And here's the other thing I wanted to say. Do you know that the fastest growing church in the world doesn't have a website? Really? Do you know that the fastest growing church in the world doesn't have social media? Do you know that the fastest growing church in the world doesn't have a building or logo or brand? Do you know that there are no famous preachers in the Middle East? Actually, there is one. His name is Jesus. He's the only famous person. I was like, literally, do you understand that like the fastest growing church in the world isn't being led by a bunch of hipsters? I'm not anti-hipster. I just want to make the point. I'm not really anti anything. I'm just for Jesus. I'm anti the Yankees, but I'm just kidding. But but listen, I want you guys to get this because this is what I believe is getting ready to come to America. We've talked about nameless, faceless generation, but no one has been willing to do it. But there's a nameless, faceless generation right now in the Middle East, and God is exploding. Guys, do you understand? Here's what happens when Jesus doesn't have competition. He shows up. That's why the Lord doesn't show up in most American churches. Because most people aren't showing up to hear Jesus. They're showing up to hear a celebrity pastor. They're showing up to hear a celebrity worship team. There are no worship teams in these countries. Do you know how you worship? I'll talk about that later in the message. But there's no worship teams. There's no pastors. There's none of that. Jesus Christ is the main attraction. Anyways, watch the trailer. Hopefully it works. If not, I'll just tell you the website. No, that's not it.
It's an incredible fight for faith. A new documentary shedding light on Muslims walking away from this.
That's not it, but that is about us. Anyways, go to Sheep Among Wolves. What's the website? I don't remember it. .world. Sheepamongwolves.world. You can watch the movie for free. Okay, let's talk about worship. Go to Malachi chapter 3. Hey, that's funny. In that interview, they called our ministry, so it's technically Sheep Among Wolves, also Global Catalytic Ministries, but the girl called it Global Cataclysmic Ministries. Anyways, whatever. We thought that was funny. She's like, Global Cataclysmic Ministries. I want to talk about worship tonight. And we're going to start in Malachi chapter 3. And I want to talk about worshiping the Lord in the end time context. Am I moving the mic too much? Am I good? Okay. So we're going to worshiping the Lord in end time context. Romans 12:1 worship movement. I spent the last few years of my life leading a global worship and prayer ministry. And did it, been all over the world, planted worship schools, and did all this stuff. In 2020, well, I'll tell you this, July of 2019, we used to host this big event in the city where I lived in Texas. And I live in Philadelphia now, and I used to live in Texas, but I flew in for the event, and I'm sitting in the hotel room, and I'm the last speaker. And we didn't know this at the time. It just so happens to be the last of this conference that we're ever going to do. And I'm closing out the event. I want an epic word to give at this event. I was sitting before the Lord in my hotel room. My wife is sleeping. I said, Lord, what do you want to say? What do you want me to say to these people? Give me an epic word. Give me something everyone to fired up. And the Lord said, you're in a very, very dangerous place. I was like, well, that's not what I was asking for. The Lord said, you're in a very, very dangerous place. And I said, Lord, what do you mean? And he said, you've become so good at this. You're this close to not even needing me to do it. That's a terrifying thing to hear the Lord say. You've gotten so good at this Christianity thing. You've gotten so good. You're such a professional minister. You've traveled and you have your cute little ministry. You're this close to, you won't even need me to do it. So I'm sitting there in the desk at the hotel room in Austin. And I said, well, Lord, and the Lord said, Malachi chapter 3. It's July of 2019. But no grid for what was getting ready to come on the earth. And I had no grid about the cross that the Lord was going to call my wife and I to. Now, here's the thing about the cross. We always talk about the cross and the cruciform life. Jesus, Luke chapter 9, if you want to, by the way, Jesus gives the qualifications of being a disciple, and none of them is pray a prayer. Just so you know. And none of them is go to church on Sunday. And none of them is tithe faithfully. What you do have is this: if you obey my commandments, you are my disciple. Very simple. If you do not obey Jesus, you're not a born again believer. You're not a disciple. If you love me, right, you're my disciple. In Luke chapter 9, if anybody desires to become my disciple, to come after me, he has to deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. You guys have heard that before, right? Who has ever heard the terminology, you got to crucify yourself? Anybody ever heard that? Raise your hand. Come on, you've been at church more than 5 minutes. You got to crucify your flesh. Do you know that it is absolutely impossible to crucify yourself? You cannot crucify yourself. See, when Jesus calls you to the cross, it's a call to embrace Judas. See, we've been so discipled by the culture of comfort and convenience, we pray Judas away. But do you know that Jesus so embraced Judas? If you understand Jewish culture and Jewish custom, Judas had the seat of honor at the final Passover Seder. The guy that gets to dip the bread with the host is the guest of honor. Because when you understand the way of God, the person that most leads you to your death, that's your best friend. Do you understand what I'm saying? Don't pray Judas away. Give him the seat next to you. Because you cannot get to the destiny of God without Judas, because there is no destiny of God without God first killing you. The cross of Christ is the doorway to every promise of God. It is impossible to experience the promises of God in your life without God first killing you. Because if he doesn't kill you, you will pervert it. Let me tell you, you want to know when you don't die and you get glory, it's called Lucifer. You know, Lucifer experienced more of the glory of God than anybody in this room. Do you know that Lucifer spent more hours in worship than anybody in this room? And what happens when you have unchecked glory? You become Satan. And that glory becomes so addicting. You go from worshiping Jesus to being worshiped yourself in Jesus' name. Friends, what we have in the American church today is a bunch of people being worshiped in Jesus' name. And man was never created to be worshiped. Because God's about to get you off of the throne. And the way he does that is called the cross. So anyways, I didn't understand what the Lord was about to do in our lives. And so the Lord was about to use a dear friend and to kill us and put us on a cross. She said, go to Malachi chapter 3. And I didn't know what was coming on the earth. I didn't know what was about to happen. I'm sitting in this hotel room. I didn't know what the Lord was about to ask my wife and I to do. In Malachi chapter 3, we're going to go to it in a second. And I read it. I didn't really have understanding. I think, let's read it. Malachi chapter 3, verse 1. Behold, I send my messenger to prepare the way. Blah, blah, blah. Actually, Behold, I send my messenger and will prepare the way before him. Here's what I want to look at. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. I've been preaching Malachi 3 for 2 years because I believe it is the most prophetic chapter to the body of Christ in the West right now. And the fact of the matter is, what happened in 2020 is God finally showed up and we didn't like it. You know what? I'm just going to be real. Honestly, whatever. I've gotten over trying to make people happy. I'm just not that convinced that God didn't have his little hand in what happened in 2020. We're going to look at this here in a second in Malachi. But I think God was trying to stop the show called American church. The Lord whom you seek suddenly shows up to the temple. Jesus showed up and we didn't like him. History proves it. Every time the Lord shows up in a generation, they kill him because he's not what they expected. Just think about that for a second. So the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. Behold, he is coming, says the Lord of hosts. I'm sitting there July 2019 and I'm reading this passage and I have no idea what's about to happen on the earth. No clue. Verse 2, but who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? Friends, this is about Jesus showing up. And Malachi is not prophesying to unbelievers. He's prophesying to you and me. And he's saying, Jesus is you're going to get the answer to your prayer. Jesus is going to come. And who can endure the day of his coming? You're going to get what you've been asking for. But I don't think you comprehend the fullness of what you've been asking for. Who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? How does he come? For he comes like a refiner's fire and like launderer's soap. So Jesus comes to clean the house. That is what happened in 2020. Friends, my personal opinion, I don't think the government, it went through the government, but I don't think it was the government shutting down churches. I think it was the Lord. By the way, if you think wearing a mask is persecution, you aren't ready for what's coming, my friend. When I read Matthew chapter 24, and Jesus gives signs of the times, masks aren't one of them. FYI. And the Lord shows up. Oh, the premise, well, the Lord wouldn't do that. Don't go there. But you know what by the way, here's the whole premise of the book of Malachi. Whole premise of the book of Malachi. And I'll use it in today's vernacular. The premise of the book of Malachi is this. Everything you sing about me is true. Okay, this is the whole premise of the book. I'm using it in today's vernacular, the way we worship. We don't sacrifice animals, we sing songs, which isn't worship, but whatever. Now, everything you sing about me is true. Everything you say about me is true, but I have an issue because what you sing isn't the reality of your heart, therefore it's perverted. And I don't even want it. That, my friends, is the message of the book of Malachi. It is a rebuke from the Lord to the priesthood because the priesthood had become perverted. Friends, what we have today is a perverted priesthood. We have a worship culture that went from priesthood to industry because every time worship has a price tag, it's industry, not priesthood. And so the Lord, whole book, he's like, everything you say, all your theology is good. All the things, you're like, right, we sing these songs, you'll break the scrolls or the souls or the seals. I don't know the song, but I hear people sing it all the time. But the Lord's like, you don't even know what you're singing. I don't even think you mean it. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking about everyone. I'm talking to myself. And so Malachi chapter 1, verse 10, everybody knows Malachi 1:11, from the rising of the sun to the setting of the same, my name shall be great among. But Malachi 1:10, the Lord says this. This is the Jose Diaz translation. I've read it 1,000 times. This is my translation. It's this. I wish somebody had the guts to shut the door to the temple, and you would stay home and you'd quit showing me up and offering me a fake offering. You go read it. He says it a lot nicer and better than that. But that's what he says. He said, I wish somebody shut the doors. Is it possible that it was the Lord that shut the doors? Because God's tired of the show. Are you guys trucking with me? Okay, I hope you're encouraged. I'm not in a bad mood. I'm in a great mood. I just checked the score a little bit. Phillies are beating the Brewers. I feel great. I love baseball. Okay. Family's from Cuba. We don't have democracy. We have baseball. All right. Verse 3. So what does the Lord show up to do? He will sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. To do what? And he will purify the sons of Levi. Or the Lord shows up to purify worship. I firmly believe what is happening in the earth right now is about God purifying worship. Because if our worship isn't right, nothing else will be. I want you guys to hear this. I don't care how good your preaching is. I don't care how good your services are. I don't care how gifted of a marketing team you have. By the way, that's only going to last for a little bit longer, and then that whole thing's going to go away. So then what do you have then? Because you understand that Jesus, Psalm 22, verse 3, you don't have to go there. The Lord isn't enthroned on your good preaching. He isn't enthroned even on your disciple making. He isn't enthroned on your creativity. He isn't enthroned even on your prayer. The only thing that the Lord builds his throne on is on the praises of his people. And that word praise literally means to sing out. So if the worship's impure, we don't get the kingdom. Do you want to know why we're not seeing the kingdom of God manifested? Because the worship is perverted. Because we're not releasing the sort of worship that God wants to come live in. Where's God? That's the wrong question. Where's the worship? And I'm not talking about getting together on the first Friday of every month and we're going to get together and do a concert from 7 to 9. I'm talking about the worship of your life. Are you living the sort of life that would make God want to leave heaven and come to earth? Do you understand? By the way, that's eschatology. Well, what's it going to take for Jesus to come back? For a people to be on the earth that so provoke the heart of God, he can't stay in heaven. So the Lord comes, Malachi chapter 3, and he says, I want to purify your worship. I'm going to purify the worship on the earth. Friends, by the way, he's not just speaking to the worship band. The worship band is the byproduct of the church's worship culture. Do you want to know why worship has become an industry? Because most of us aren't disciples, we are consumers. That is the problem. You are converted consumers, and you've purchased a product. That product is called Christianity, and you pay a subscription. That subscription is called your tithe, and you show up every week to pay your subscription to consume your product called Christianity. That is what's wrong with us. We're consumers, and we get mad, and we vote on things, and we don't like to say, are you serious? Lord, deliver us from consumer Christianity. Lord, forgive us for ever putting a price tag on worship. There is a price tag. It's not $1. It's your life. And we've replaced the life with the dollar. So anyways, the Lord's going to purify the worship on the earth. He's going to purify the sons of Levi. That's you and me. And he's going to purge them as gold and silver. For what reason? That they may offer to the Lord an offering in righteousness. In other words, God says, I am going to come clean you so your worship can be pure again. Come on, how many of us told the Lord years ago, if you shut everything down, if I was the only person left, I would worship you extravagantly? Anybody? The Lord shut it all down, and all you did was, oh, I didn't really mean that. I want to get the heck out of my house because I don't really know how to get alone with God. You know what the Lord exposed to us? Jesus' presence isn't enough. So, read this. Oh, let's keep going. Then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasant to the Lord, as in the days of old, as in the former years. Here's the point. I cannot judge your worship, but God can, and God does. So I read this passage, and I'm kind of rocked, and I go through this journey from July until June 2020. The whole world's shut down. My wife is pregnant, so she's laying on the couch, and I'm sitting outside in my balcony in Philadelphia, and the Lord speaks to me, and he says this. That whole year, the Lord spoke a lot to me. Can I tell you one of the things the Lord told me that has nothing to do with what I'm preaching, but I want to tell you anyways. As I've said, I've just been sitting 4 months looking at 2 kids. You know what the Lord told me? I was praying. I just want to tell you this. Nobody talks about this stuff anymore. I was praying and the Lord said, you tolerate adultery. And I said, no, I don't. The Lord was saying, oh, you tolerate adultery. And I said, what do you mean I tolerate adultery? And the Lord said, no, you watch The Office. Oh, I know. I just touched a golden calf to half the millennial Christians in this room. But I love that show. I used to watch it all the time. And the Lord said, no, you tolerate it. I said, Lord, I don't tolerate it. He said, no, the very thing that nailed me to the cross, you call entertainment. I was like, in my room, like, for real? Yeah, and I was like, I don't really want to stop watching the show, Lord. It's pretty funny, and I live a pretty strenuous life, and it's nice to unwind. I'm being real. Like, really? And the Lord said, no. Because, and here's what, you know what he told me? He said, because when adultery might be entertainment now, but when your life gets hard, it'll become your reality. And he dealt with me. He said, I'm not okay with you being entertained by the very things that sent me to hell. And the Lord said, get rid of it. Because if you tolerate it here, you'll learn to tolerate it here. You want to know why most of us can't stay pure? Because you feast on adultery. You're entertained by the homosexual agenda. You're entertained and you pay money to watch things that force God in flesh to be beaten and crucified naked on a tree. That's what's wrong with us. How come we don't see miracles? Maybe because you're watching the wrong thing. How come we don't see God move? Maybe because you spend all your time watching Netflix. How come God doesn't speak to me in dreams? Because you're too busy searching on your phone the moment you go to bed and the moment you wake up. In other words, God's not going to interrupt your little life. So anyways, another conversation. This is the one I really want to tell you about. I just feel like I should tell you that. Here, let me tell you why. I want you guys to hear me. I know I sound like I'm all over the place. I promise you I'm not. The Lord told me everything I had to say tonight. Let me tell you why. You don't even understand that we in our generation will see the fullness of sin manifested on the earth. It's one of the signs before Jesus returns is not only that the Antichrist is revealed, but sin and wickedness like we have never seen before will reach its fullness. Can you imagine sin reaching its peak? The Lord spoke to me. And the Lord said to me, he said, in the same way that sin will reach its peak, I will raise up a standard of righteousness on the earth. And the Lord said, your consecration will be your preservation from what's getting ready to come on the earth. Friends, this generation of ours, we need to learn to clean our eyes and to protect what we see and what we watch. Quit watching television and go start looking at him. Because you cannot worship a God you've never seen. So anyways, I'm sitting on my balcony. And the Lord speaks to me. And the Lord says, Jose, we've gotten to a place where you only do ministry. And you're on a platform with a microphone in your hand. And you're getting an honorarium, you're getting a check. And the Lord says, I'm grieved with you. I said, okay. And the Lord said, I want you to shut the whole thing down. I want you to shut your ministry, your website, your social media, your platform. I want you to shut the whole thing down. And it was this invitation to find the Lord again. I'll never forget it. Like the Lord showed up and he didn't have a promising word. It was like, you do this, I don't like that. You do this, I didn't die for that. You do, like the Lord is like, you're fake. You're a professional. You've got a great ministry. You can talk and you can blah, 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 but you're losing me. Confronted me on my balcony. You've got a great little ministry, but you're losing me. Shut it down. You've got it to the point where all you do, and it's what he told me. So I traveled the world preaching on worship. I've been all over the globe. I've been to 6 continents. The Lord said, you preach about worship, but you haven't worshiped in a long time. I'm about to teach you how to worship. And he brought me right back to this Malachi chapter 3. Jesus showed up into my temple. He showed up into my life and he says, I'm about to clean your house. I said, I want to look at something. Let's go to John chapter 2. Are you guys good? So I'm going to share some things that the Lord gave me today on the flight here. Again, I'm not in a hurry. I hope you're not. Oh, you got to get done in an hour. Do you know that one time Paul preached so long, a guy fell asleep, fell out of the window, died? Then he raised him from the dead. And then he said, let's continue. So, well, brother, listen. If you could sit and watch The Lord of the Rings, we could sit through it preaching. Don't you tell me that this generation has a short attention span. No, we'll sit for the things we want. The fact is, we just don't want his word. We want his touch. It's called prostitution. You know what I mean? It's called prostitution. Okay, anyways. I was meditating on this on the flight. It's Malachi 3, the Lord showing up to his temple. And it was like, oh, Jesus, you're cleansing the temple. And I want to look at this. Do you know that Jesus cleanses the temple 2 times? Cleanses the temple 2 times. At the beginning of his ministry and at the end of his ministry. 2 times. Anybody ever catch that before? It's not this 2 different stories of the same event. It's 2 different events. And both happen to happen around Passover. Jesus cleanses the temple at 2 different times. I was meditating on that. And the Lord spoke to me and he said, I cleansed the temple twice because I cleansed the temple in my first coming. And I'm about to cleanse the temple before my second coming. I started everything with the cleansing of the temple, and I'm about to end this whole storyline. And friends, this time the temple isn't a building. The temple is you and me. I want to look at these 2 accounts. Are you guys good? I'm just going to read them to you. We're going to talk about them. John chapter 2. This is the first time Jesus cleanses the temple. This is how Jesus begins his ministry. By the way, if you ever go to a church planting seminar, this is not how they tell you to start your ministry in a city. But if you're trying to build your ministry like a business, don't do it. If you're trying to build your ministry Jesus' way, well, here's a way to do it. All right, you know that, I love this. I'm just ranting, is that okay? I call these like prophetic rantings. I'm just a weird guy. My wife thinks so, but isn't it like, I get on these phone calls with these leaders. They're like, I'm the CEO of this ministry. I'm the CEO. And I was like, brother, I'm sorry to pause the meeting. I was looking for CEO in the book of Acts. Can you help me find it? For real. Executive pastor. How about that one? I was looking for it in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Can you help me find executive pastor? Oh, the truth is we're not building ministries. We're building businesses. Okay. But that's not what I want. But okay. So John chapter 2. Jesus shows up. This is how he starts his ministry. Now the Passover, both times is at Passover. Guess what we're at? Passover. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand. And Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Verse 14. I started at verse 13, now verse 14. And he, Jesus, found in the temple those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, and the money changers were doing business. Whenever church becomes business, it's perverted. Guys, this isn't a business. You are not the CEO of Jesus' body. You are not the COO of Jesus' body. You're not the chief of anything. Jesus is. Well, the executive, you're not the executive. You're not the chief. You're not even the senior. Jesus is. You know what? This is what the Lord is dealing with. We're no longer a body, we're a business. He shows up to the temple. The place of sacrifice had become the place of business. The place of sacrifice became the place of transaction. Jesus is grieved over what he finds on the earth in the temple. Now, I'll break this down in a second. Verse 15. And when Jesus, made a whip of cords. Jesus is the one with the whip. And you know what he did with the whip of cords? He whipped people. You don't make a whip to whip nothing. And he sure as heck wasn't whipping cattle. He was whipping people. Jesus would never do that. That's because you don't read your Bible. No, he did it at the beginning of his ministry. Could you imagine planning a church? All right. Go look for every pervert and beat them. I'm kidding. Don't do that. And definitely don't put that on the internet. I'm on enough websites. One said I made $500,000 a year. I'm like, I wish. I would like email them like, what do you know that I don't know? I'm like, in Jesus' name, I hope you're a prophet. I said, yes, I'll take it. It didn't happen. Actually, I was incredibly broke that year. Couldn't even pay my taxes. And I went fishing and didn't even catch any. Okay. I haven't caught fish in a lot of years. Anyways, Jesus makes the whip and he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen and poured out the changers' money and overturned the tables. And he said to those who sold doves, they were selling the presents. Selah. Jesus said to those that sold doves, friends, you know what's wrong with us? Is we're selling the dove. Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise. And then his disciples remembered that it was said of him, zeal for your house has eaten me up. Let me explain to you what Jesus is referring to. See, the issue, people read this verse and then somebody's outside selling a book. They're like, turn the tables. That's not what he's talking about. This is what he's talking about. See, what were they selling? Oxen, sheep, doves. What were they selling? Worship. So here was the premise. When you came to worship at the temple, Jerusalem's down in the south, right before the Negev desert. Let's say you lived up in the Golan Heights, up in the northern part of the Galilee. It is about a week to 2 week walk, depending on how many people you got with you and how fast you can walk, a week to 2 week walk. And it took you several weeks to go prepare for a moment of worship. Because you actually had to go find an animal that was suitable to be offered to God. That's a new one for us, isn't it? Suitable worship. Do you know why worship has to be suitable? Because your worship is your declaration of how much you think God is worth. Can I ask you a question? Is your worship equal to his worth? And so you had to go prepare the animal. You had to go find an animal that was good enough, that was qualified to be given to the Lord. And then once you found that animal, you then had to take care of it and keep it and nurture it and protect it. Because at some point, you and your entire family were going to get up and spend 2 weeks walking from one end of a country to the southern end of a country, crossing hills, thieves, marauders, deserts, just so you can show up and in 5 minutes, give it to the priest so they can kill it and give it to the Lord. You know what happened? It just became too exhausting to worship. It's such an inconvenience to worship Jesus. It's exhausting. It's burdensome. And so here's what they said. They said, you know what? Here's what we'll do. Don't worry about preparing yourself. Don't worry about preparing the animal. Don't worry even. No. Just show up with your money. And we'll give you your worship. That's what Jesus was pissed off about. Because you ever read the story from this context? He's the one receiving the worship. If you ever read it from that context, he's the one they're worshiping. And he's grieved and he's like, how dare you insult me? Do you know my worth? Do you know how glorious I am? Do you understand? I can breathe and destroy you. I gave you life. I told the water to stop here, the earth to begin here. I put stars in the skies. I formed you out of dust. And you can't spend 2 weeks preparing an offering? That's what the Lord was dealing with. Because you've made this thing a den of thieves. You've taken, you know what here's what it is. You have taken the price tag off of worship. and this is for the end of the message, but just newsflash, the price tag is your life. Then his disciples remembered that it was written, right? Verse 18, to the Jews answered and said to him, what sign do you show to us since you do these things? Jesus answered and said to them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Therefore, when he had risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that it said, in other words, I want to get into that in a second, because that's like a nice little punchline. Let's go to the next time Jesus cleanses the temple. Matthew chapter 21. Are you guys with me? Remember the old Kirk Franklin song, GP, are you with me? Yeah. First time in 10 years somebody finished it. I go to too many white churches. They're just already offended because I talked about Trump. You know who you are. You might have your little appeal to heaven flag, but you're praying the wrong prayers. You know what heaven's praying? I'm not praying for Trump to come back, they're praying for Jesus to come back. Amen. By the way, it's God that puts people in office. So God put Trump and Biden. So deal with it. And you better be praying for both of them. And you can't pray for someone and then curse them at the same time. Amen. Pray for Biden's brain. Okay. I'm being serious. Pray. Okay, so Matthew chapter 21. I'm weird, man. I often just pray, Lord, don't let me say something horrible. Most of the time I'm praying, I'm like, don't let me end my ministry tonight. I've said a lot of dumb things. Whatever. Okay. Thank God for the internet. So Matthew chapter 21, this is the end of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is going to be crucified a few days after this. Matthew chapter 21. Then Jesus went into the temple of God. And drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple. And overturned tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold what? Doves. They're selling the presents. And he said to them, it is written, my house shall be called a house of preaching, a house of services. No, wait a minute. A house of prayer. If your church doesn't pray, then you ain't Jesus' church. But you've made it a den of thieves. Verse 14. Then the blind, I love this verse, and the lame, they like being lame, huh? That's like the worst title for a disease, like the lame. You couldn't say crippled. They're like, that guy's lame. Anyways, I just think about that. But the blind and the lame came to him in the temple and healed them. Look at this. Look who shows up. Jesus is in the temple. I want to point this out. Both instances, nobody that was there to worship even caught wind of the God that they were worshiping was in the temple. You know what that tells you? You could spend all of your life going to church and going to events and going to conferences and actually never worship Jesus. But I've offered my oxen and I've offered my bull and you did all this stuff, but you couldn't even recognize that the God you were sacrificing to was standing right there. The very one, the high priest, once a year in Yom Kippur, is going to go into the holy place to offer the lamb. And the lamb is standing there and they can't even see him. We become so self-focused, so consumed with ourselves, we can't even see Jesus anymore. Can I provoke you a little bit? I want to ask you something, honestly. Have you even worshiped yet this weekend? I'm not saying, did you sing along with the band? I'm talking about, have you even worshiped yet this weekend? Have you seen him yet? Jesus and the blind and the lame recognize him. Anyways, the chief priests, they all get offended. I want to point out a few things that are important. The first thing is, the first account, in the beginning of his ministry, Jesus says, destroy the temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up, right? Matthew chapter 21, the second time, this is right at the end of Jesus' ministry. Do you know what Jesus is going to prophesy the very next day? The destruction of the temple. This is all one stream of consciousness. He shows up, drives out the money changers. He rebukes the Pharisees. He goes back up to the Mount of Olives, Matthew chapter 23, and Jesus begins to weep over Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how long to gather your children as a mother hen gathers her chicks. But you will not see me until you learn to say, Baruch haba Hashem Adonai, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. And then the disciples, because the disciples still don't get it. They still don't get it. Do you know what they say? You know what their response is? Isn't the temple amazing? Right? You know what it is? Isn't our ministry amazing? Look at how many people show up. Look at our numbers. Look how many hits we got. What the heck is a hit? Anyways. Oh, our little hashtag and our blah, blah, blah. Look at our temple. Look at our great edifices that we've made. And you know what Jesus says? He says, you still don't get it. He goes, oh, verily, verily, I say to you, not one stone shall be left unturned upon another. And they're affronted by this. He's like, Jesus, the Lord of the temple, says, I'm going to destroy the temple. I want you guys to get this tonight. I know it's late. I know I've been talking for a long time. It's okay. God's going to take us somewhere tonight. The Lord of the temple says, I'm going to destroy the temple. I was meditating on this. And here's what the Lord told me. He said, it's as though Jesus was saying, I have to destroy the very thing we have used to industrialize and commodify worship. Friends, the Lord is going to destroy every temple that we have built. I'm not talking about buildings, but that's going to happen too. I'm talking about the American Christianity, the American church as we know it. The Lord is going to tear down the temple, because until it happens, we aren't going to learn how to worship the Lord in spirit and in truth. God's going to get rid of the worship industry. God's going to get rid of the commodification of worship. He's going to get rid of the industrialization of worship. And he's going to completely, radically purify the thing. Do you know the number one catalyst for the gospel going to the nations? You know what it was? The destruction of the temple. The moment that building is destroyed, everybody goes out. I want to point out another thing. Do you know what happened to Jesus the day, a few days before he goes to the temple? Do you know what happened? He went to Bethany, to the house of a man named Lazarus. And it was at that dinner, the little girl named Mary took an alabaster jar of oil and comes crawling on her knees and breaks her jar of oil on Jesus' feet. What a contrast. It's just 6 days. Look at this. It's John chapter 12. You don't have to go there. I'll read it to you. Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus, who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead, they made him a supper, right? And Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard. There's a lot of accounts about how much this oil cost. Let's say a good estimate, maybe $50,000 to $100,000. Will Ford teaches that these prostitutes, what they would do is they would go around and they'd sleep with men and they'd save all their money to buy a jar of perfume. So when they found the right one that would rescue them from their life, they would go and put this perfume on themselves for their wedding day. This perfume was for them. But something happened in Mary when she saw Jesus, that she not only realized that he was the one, she realized this perfume ain't even for me, it's for him. She comes crawling. She comes, she takes it, and she anoints the feet of Jesus. And she wipes his feet with her own hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of oil. 6, do you understand how pungent this oil is? That's what Jesus smelled like when he shows up to the temple. He was being fueled and motivated by the worship of Mary. I want to be the sort of worshiper that my worship is so pungent that it motivates Jesus to move. The oil is so pungent. In fact, every time Jesus gets whipped with the cat of nine tails, it's like a spray of Mary's perfume. You know what the crucifixion scene smelled like? Mary. 6 days. She breaks it. She wipes the feet of Jesus' hair. Oh, but one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box and he used to take what was put in it. But let's move on. Do you know what he said? Why didn't we commodify her worship? In some other accounts, it says, what a waste. We could have taken it. We could have mixed it and mastered it. We could have made it into a moment, put it on YouTube, and made a whole bunch of money off of it. What a waste. I got so provoked by this. And Gerald was talking about the Last Supper, and then nobody ever thinks they're Judas in the story. But I bet some of us were more like Judas than we think. And when push comes to shove, we'd rather have the money than Jesus. We'd rather have our dreams fulfilled than Jesus. We'd rather have a great name before men than Jesus. We'd rather have a great ministry than Jesus. We'd rather have our temples and our empires built than Jesus. What a waste. What a waste. We could have put this worship on blast for the whole world to see. And Jesus says, oh, you don't even get it. Look at what he says. Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. We're talking about prophetic worship. She's done this for the day of my burial. Isn't it interesting that in Philippians chapter 3, Paul says, oh, that I may know him, the power of his resurrection, but he calls suffering fellowship. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not always have. Significant, like paradox. Mary's anointing of Jesus. 6 days later, Jesus comes to the temple and he still smells like Mary. I'm just going to read a few things off to you before I close. Is that okay? I'm just going to read a few things. So Mary's in Bethany. Here's what's amazing about Bethany. Bethany is the outskirts of Jerusalem. Bethany is the closest you can get to Jerusalem as a leper without going to Jerusalem. It's the outskirts. I believe there's people that God is hiding in the outskirts of places that are like Marys of Bethany's that he's going to raise up. There's a Mary of Bethany company that Jesus is going to raise up, whose extravagant worship will prepare the way for Jesus' end-time procession to go to war with the enemy, the Antichrist in Jerusalem. Mary's worship prepared the way for Jesus to ride that donkey down into Jerusalem. Hope you guys are trekking with this. I'm going to go through this fast because I want to get to something. However, their alabaster jars that they will break will be their very lives. I want to make a point. I know I'm going long. Is this okay? The Lord told me to say this. I'm just going to say it. I'd rather obey him than make you happy. I believe we're at the cusps of the end time storyline where the church will enter the great tribulation in order to be purified by the fires of persecution to be made ready for her husband, Jesus. I believe this is where we're headed. And we're about to see the purest expression of worship on the earth. I wanted you to look at Romans chapter 12, verse 1. That's what they sang tonight. Romans chapter 12, verse 1. Paul says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the Lord, for this is your basic form of worship. Basic form of worship is sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of things, it's the sacrifice of your life. I believe we're on the cusps of entering into what the Bible calls the day of the Lord. And that some of us here will actually be alive to see the great tribulation. What if I told some of you that your greatest, this is not the kind of thing you hear preached nowadays, but I still feel this from the Lord, that actually your calling is to be a martyr. You ever thought about that? Your calling might actually be to die for the Lord. Friends, that is the end time worship movement. Isn't a concert, it's martyrdom. Well, when David says a sacrifice of praise, friends, it's death. Sacrifice, it's death. The glory of the new covenant, I'm just giving it to you as the Lord gave it to me today. The Lord's going to purify the church. How's he going to purify the church? It's called persecution. God will use persecution to purify us. Malachi chapter 3, the Lord shows up and he comes to purify worship. Nothing will purify worship more than persecution. Friends, we are going to see persecution in America. There is going to come an hour where you will have to pay great price to follow Jesus. You've not paid the price yet, but you will pay the price. That persecution will come heavy and it'll come strong. And it won't just come from government leaders and political leaders. Jesus gave us a promise, and that promise is some of your parents are going to betray you. Some of your children, your cousins, your Sunday school teacher, they will betray you because they will fold to the pressures of culture and they will give you up, and you will get to be an offering to the Lord. It's one thing to kill a goat. It's another thing to be the sacrifice yourself. When Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 1, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God. God doesn't give you mercy to sin. God gives you mercy to die. He gives you mercy to do the thing you don't have the power to do, to become a living sacrifice. In other words, it's this: live ready to die. You guys, I know this isn't encouraging, but it's the truth. We will see persecution in America. And many are going to be offended. They're going to be shocked. They're going to be offended at Jesus. They're going to be offended with their leaders. Oh, but at the same time, love is going to be strengthened like in no other time in history. We will see a response of whole heart. So you know, here's what persecution does. It gets rid of lukewarm Christianity. Because you see, the great outpouring of the Holy Spirit at the end will be the byproduct of the greatest persecution, because it will clean us. And when God strips you of everything and all you have is God, then God begins to show up. Can I keep reading? This is what the Lord gave me. The glory of the new covenant is that we are empowered to die as Jesus died. See, in the older covenant, we did not have the grace to die, so we had to kill animals. In the new covenant, we have the power and the grace to offer ourselves as the sacrifice. You want to worship Jesus? You don't need a band. You don't need a platform. You don't need a playlist. You just need to learn how to die. Our understanding of building altars will look very different on that day. Would you guys jump up if you don't mind? Let's go to Revelation chapter 6. Oh, this is kind of intense. I felt like the Lord told me the other day, you've seen the volunteer missions movement, but the day will come where you will see the volunteer martyr movement. It's the purest form of worship, is to lay down your life, because no greater love can a friend have than to lay down his life for a friend. And see, that's the glory of being the end time church. We will get to give Jesus an I love you that no other generation in human history has ever given. Because for the first time, persecution will touch every part of the earth. So this sounds intense, but no, like where love will be matured in that day. When for the first time as Westerners, we start thinking about the cost of what it means to worship and to follow the Lord. Friends, we're not going back to normal. We're going to glory. There's only one way to get to glory. It's called death. I'm going to read a scripture, but before I read it, then we're going to close with that scripture. Do you remember? You guys can stand. Do you remember when Lazarus was dying and they came to Jesus? You guys remember that? Jesus didn't heal Lazarus, and he said, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes. And it's just because now you can see the glory of God. All right, Revelation chapter 6, verse 9. Don't read it. I'm going to read it to you. I want you guys just to close your Bibles and put it down. I want you to take this in. So we prayed tonight for the Lord to break open the scrolls, right? To break open the seals. Here's one of the seals you prayed for. Revelation chapter 6, verse 9. There's going to come a day where we're not going to have worship concerts and gatherings that we know them. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God, for the testimony which they held. That's what we prayed for tonight. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer. You know who gets to enter the rest? The martyrs. Until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed. This is a really weird thing, but I've felt this thing for the last year. God is releasing this martyr's grace over a generation. And it's going to be about more than laying down your cell phone, more than laying down your dream, more than laying down entertainment. Some of us will get the ultimate honor. If you guys mind moving this for me real quick. Some of us will get to have the ultimate honor laying down our lives. Or maybe it's laying down our children. It's an old song that was written. Remember the old song, I have decided to follow Jesus? Do you know that one? Just do it for a second. I just Benny Hinned you. Like just do the first verse. I have this. Yeah, sing it out to him. Sing it out to the Lord. Yeah, come on. Good job. Sing it one more time. But everybody stay standing for a second if you can. One more time. All right. This is the story of how the song was written. You guys ever heard the story? His family, they were missionaries, I believe somewhere, I think India. They were ministering, this husband, wife, and his children. They were ministering in this village and they never made a single convert. Finally, the town got tired of them and took the husband, his wife, and his children. I think it was 3 girls. And they said, you need to deny Jesus or you're going to die. They said, we're not denying Jesus. So they took the first child and killed that child in front of the father and mother. They said, deny Jesus or we'll kill the next child. So we're not going to deny Jesus. So they kill the next child. They said, deny Jesus or we'll kill the third child. So we're not going to deny Jesus. They take the third child and they martyr the child. Now it's just the husband and the wife, and they look at the husband and they say, deny Jesus or we'll kill your wife. He doesn't respond, does it? They kill the wife. This man has just watched his children and his wife get martyred. And they look at him and they say, deny Jesus and live. And you know what his response was? I have decided. And he begins to, the Lord gives him the song. And he begins to sing the song out. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. And they kill him. And after they kill him, the town is so impacted that the entire town comes to Jesus. Right there. And they realize we have to write the song down. So they get the song recorded, they write it down. And a few years later, Baptist missionaries show up to this town and the entire town is converted and they follow the Lord and they say, who led you to Jesus? And they told the story of this family that laid down their lives for Jesus and all they left behind was a song. This, my friends, is the sort of worship that's getting ready to hit the earth. It's not the sort of worship that you're going to get at a songwriting retreat or by somebody laying hands on you, but it's songs that will come because you gave your life for them. Tonight's topic is worship Jesus. The hour is going to come, my friend, where it's not going to be about your song or your this or that's going to be about your life. So I just want to make a call tonight. I'm not going to really pray for anyone. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I just want to make a call. God wants to release the martyr's grace. And that doesn't mean you're going to die necessarily, physically. But it's a covenant with the Lord that says, everything, I'm yours. I'm dead. Come on, if you want that grace to be a martyr, I want you to come down. Just come down tonight. Don't just do it because you're at a conference. Because some of you, the Lord's going to hold you to your word. And you're going to find yourself in a country. And in the middle of the night, they're going to pull you out of your bedroom. Come on. Let's get on our knees before, if you can. If you can't get on your knees, sit. Lord, forgive us for selling the dove. Forgive us for commodifying our worship, Lord. Forgive us, Lord, for industrializing worship and industrializing the priesthood. God, forgive us for every excuse we make, God. Lord, forgive us for watching television shows, Lord, that grieve your heart. Forgive us for tolerating the woman Jezebel. Forgive us for cheapening worship. Forgive us, Lord. Forgive us for playing the harlot. We come back to you again, Jesus. We come back to you again and we say, here we are. Take our lives. Give us the martyr's mantle. Give us the martyr's mantle. Father, we want to be the generation of the fifth seal. Those who lay it all down. And we say tonight, you can have our lives, whether by life or by death. I am Jesus's. Come on, just begin to lift your voices to the Lord tonight. Come on, just give him your life tonight again. Just give your life to Jesus. Give it all. Give him your family. Just give it all to the Lord. We give it all. We choose the cross tonight. Come on. Don't just give him lip service. We choose the cross. We choose the cross. We say yes to you. We will pay the price, whether by life or by death. Come on, sing it out. Come on, lay it down. Lord, we're going to worship you again. Come on. Sing it out, sing it out.
No turning back, the cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning.
Father, we ask you to glorify Christ in our bodies, whether by life or by death. We are yours.